Good evening, and I thank anyone who is watching this video, and hope you enjoy it, especially Professor Poffenroth, who is the instructor of ESO1, and I will be giving this presentation about fracking. Um, so let's begin. What is fracking? Pretty sure you're all wondering. It is basically the form of extraction that we use to process and distribute oil. It's how we get our oil nowadays, hydraulic fracturing. Um, it is a type of process that begins by drilling down into the earth and gradually changing horizontally to create wells. Um, these drill sites span about 1,000 feet into the earth, and they go straight down and change horizontally into the shale rock formations, which is several layers beneath the earth, which is where most of the crude oil that we get from is formed. Uh, after the drilling process, there is a machine that sends a mixture of water, sand, and other various chemicals that are pumped at a very high pressure that will fracture, will create tiny fractures inside the shale rock formations. Uh, these microfractures, they stay open because of the grains of salt in the sand that are able to make this happen. And once that happens, the oil and the gas is released through these pathways, through these tiny micro cracks, and make its way back up to the surface. Oops. So here's a diagram of, a typical fracking site. Here's your conventional oil and gas drill. Um, as you can see through your conventional gas drill, you can just see that it's about, just about, I'd say a half mile from where we typically get our oil now compared to these, where you could see the horizontal drilling that makes its way for what we now do for hydraulic fracking. Back then, we would only be able to get so much oil from these tiny little pockets of shale. And as you can see now, obviously the consumption or the amount we produce now has increased significantly because of hydraulic fracking. And as you can also see, that is also why most of our gas prices have dropped significantly. So I'm going to give you guys a little history and background on fracking. Um, in 1865, a man by Edward Roberts, patented what was called what he considered the exploding torpedo, which is a very early predecessor for fracking, almost 200 years ago. Excuse me. And this was a very crude way of, fracturing deep beneath the drill sites because we didn't have the technology to hydraulically frack or hydraulically fracture like we used to or like we do now. Um, it was just a casing with gunpowder and nitroglycerin that was sent down the drill sites or sent down the sites to fracture these oil wells. It was an iron casing, and it contained about 15-20 pounds of gunpowder, as well as nitroglycerin. Um, Later on in the 1930s, an experiment was conducted on hydraulic fracturing. Unfortunately, it was unsuccessful, but later on, at about 1950s, late 1940s, two more experiments were conducted, which resulted in a great success. Later on, in 1990, a man by the name of George P. Mitchell, for the first time, he was able to create a technique which we now use today for what we consider hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. Now, we're going to go into some advantages about this, and obviously there's going to be some controversies currently in the media. But let's go over with why fracking has changed our lives. Now, this allows to drill into more deposits of oil and gas within shale formations. Like we see in this part right here, this is our conventional oil of gas and drilling. Obviously, this little formation of shale is going to give us only so much. But now when we look into hydraulic fracking sites, this is what we dig into now. These vertical type of these vertical drill wells into all of this shale rock, which all of that crude oil we can produce now, is also led to, like I said, stated earlier, our reason that gas prices have lowered, as I said right here. Um, Also, this releases natural gases from the earth, which sometimes in accumulation isn't a good thing. More places, because of fracking, have become accessible for these natural gases because of hydraulic fracking, and natural gases tend to emit less carbon dioxide than when coal is burned for energy. So, in turn, obviously, that means we end up with less greenhouse gases. Um, and the best part of all is we are securing more jobs, about in the millions of jobs, and like 2-3 million jobs. And we're encouraging a less reliance on another country for these natural resources, which you could have seen from history back in the 1990s, that whole war with oil and stuff. And of course, is a lot of controversy, though, unfortunately, and the reason being is of the rapid consumption of water and other resources that we have been obviously exploiting because of this. Each fracking site requires about 1 to 8 million gallons of water, and it takes another 400 tanker trucks to carry that water and other supplies such as the chemicals and the sand. And where are all those tankers powered by? They are powered by diesel. Diesel is part of a compound is the compound one of the compounds that is composed from crude oil that we pump out of the floor, out of the ground. And of course, as you could see in the picture again, right here, we have groundwater, which is what most organisms and humans rely on these days. Obviously, as well as us. Uh, we we have to um, we have to be conscious of that and where we frack, because contaminating our water supply, it becomes unsafe for our consumption. And there have been reports that when the methane found in fracking sites, or not in fracking sites, but in the drill areas of the fractures, have such a high concentration of methane, when those contaminate the groundwater, it can be very, very unsafe. And we're looking at about 17 times higher amounts of methane just because we frack into the earth. Um, Now, more controversy would include air pollution. The air pollution from the methane gases are more prominent near fracking sites. Methane gases from the shale rock formations have a very high concentration. Now imagine all of that going into the earth, into the earth's atmosphere, creating more problems, more climate change that we've been facing, and all that stuff. These methane gases are also considered carcinogens, which could contaminate not just the groundwater, but as well as the atmosphere. And of course, carcinogens in high quantities are harmful to any organisms when inhaled. Um, and strangest one of all, but very true, is earthquakes. We have a lot of faults, especially in California, and there are actually many of faults where are right now are very dormant and non-active and uh, very peaceful areas, particularly the Midwestern states, and especially Kentucky, who would be seeing actually very small amounts of ruptures in dormant faults, or very small faults. But you could tell, or they could tell, that ever since fracking was introduced into the areas, they were noticing a lot more earthquakes ranging around, the 3 to 4 on the Richter scale. And, obviously the Earth in general has tectonic movement, no matter how big or how small, but considerably more tectonic seismic activity has been occurring in the Midwestern states only because of that. Now, we're running out of time, and I just wanted to show you guys more of where faults exist within the shale rocks, and, right around here is where they exist, and how can we stop this? There's something called the Frack Act. We will require drilling companies by this act to receive permits before establishing fracking sites, and companies will have to disclose what chemicals will use to release these gases. This was introduced back in 2011 to the Senate, but was introduced in 2015 for reevaluation. And sorry, but that's all the time we have. And here are some of my references, if you guys decide, courtesy of some of the images were from Commons of Wikimedia.org. Thank you for your time, and thank you very much. Have a good day.